Hello, you are listening to The Professional Artist. I am Chernik, and we are broadcasting live on the United Public Radio Network, 1077 FM in New Orleans, simulcast on YouTube and Facebook. Please like, follow, subscribe, and ring the notification bell. My guest today is Tremani Sutcliffe, and oh my goodness, we are going to have so much fun today. We were just chatting. This entire podcast is about the artist's journey and how we get to where we are in our careers and how everybody's journey is just a little bit different. And she has definitely got a journey to share with us. So thank you for joining me, Tremani. How the heck did you get to where you are?
A very boring childhood to start off with. Lots of time for practice. If you want to go furthest back, it was the Picasso-like reproductions on my mom's walls with my sister's lipstick. Going forward from that, it was either, I could probably blame artistic progress on my mom. When I was 7 or 8, I went through this phase because we lived in the middle of nowhere. So I'd go up to her and I'd be like, "Mom, I'm so bored." And she'd just glare at me like no sympathy. And she'd be like, "You can go to your room and color, or you can go clean the bathroom." I'm like, "I'm coloring.
I'm going to go color. I'm just going to go down the wall."
So now I'm adult. She's like, "Are you going to get yourself a real career?" And I'm like, "I'm coloring."
Well, this is her fault then.
You trained me for it. So.
You can clean the bathroom, you can color. Yeah. All right, you can get a job where you can color. I'm going to color.
Exactly. She's like, "You could be a cleaning lady." I'm like, "No, I'm coloring." I think most artists, you can go back to different points in your life and you're like, okay, well, was it at this point or that point? And pretty soon you just realized it was always in your blood, So the thing that really kickstarted it though, like when I was younger, I would do portraits and everything for people. There was a local artist who had an art studio and he'd give people lessons. And I went into him and I was like, "Hey, what's the hardest thing for people to do?" And he says, "Oh, you don't want to start off with that. That's hands and feet and, and portraits. Like you don't want to start with that. You want to start with something that's easier." And I was like, "No, I'm going to do portraits." And he's just looking at me like this 13-year-old kid. And he's like, "Okay, but here's the thing. If you start off going for the hardest thing that's out there, right? And you tackle it. And if it doesn't look perfect, okay, well, that's fine. You're tackling the hardest thing, whatever. It's not going to be perfect." So it just kind of removes the self-consciousness or self-criticism from it and just lets you accept, okay, I'm not where I want to be right now, but I will be there. So I wound up doing portraits for friends, neighbors, whatever. I'd sell them for enough money to buy the next canvas to do the next portrait. So I did portraits for like 15 years.
Okay.
Just, get used to it. And I got pretty good with the portrait thing.
Got you out of cleaning the toilets, right?
Got me out of, yeah, exactly. And then I wound up getting a job at an art gallery in Alaska. Started off doing like the fine art reproductions for making the prints for other artists to sell on the high end. So that I learned a lot from. And then I ended up getting promoted to manager and, continued helping other artists who were bringing in their work, talking to them about marketing and selling their work, learning from them about what was working for them, but also sharing what I had in turn learned, so it was a good community and good spot to be in to start figuring out the business side of things. But it wasn't until I found out that Brandon Sanderson was going to be coming to Alaska to do a book signing. And there was a picture frame that I had built with my dad before he passed away. It was one of the last ones that we built together. And I'd been looking for years to try and find some art that I liked to put in it. And for some reason, I don't know why I didn't just think about doing my own artwork for it, but I wanted fantasy art and I was a portrait artist. So, I was looking and it was either, okay, art's the right size, but the colors don't match the stain on it. And I don't want to change anything about the frame I built with my dad. He passed away of cancer and it was the last thing that I built with him. I wanted to, keep it the way that it was. And I found out 3 days before the signing that, Brandon Sanderson was going to do a book signing. I'm like, okay, I'll do fan art for The Way of Kings and get him to sign it. And then it's art signed by my favorite author for my favorite book series. And it's art that I did. And then that will fit in the frame, and I can make sure the colors work with the stain. And then I can put that up on my wall, and it'll be more, it'll be perfect. It'll be more meaningful. So I had 3 days, and I just got into digital painting. I had just bought my first Cintiq screen. And so I knew I didn't want to be standing in line with like a wet oil painting. So I did it digital.
And the Cintiq, just for those of you that are listening, a Cintiq is the screen that you can draw right on.
Yep.
And yeah, you have the pen. I use one of those. It's awesome.
It's the only thing to do digital art on.
Oh yeah.
Sorry. I know some people do great work on the other tablets that it's just the drawing tablet and you see on the screen. So you're drawing down here, but looking up here. Some people do phenomenal work on that. Good for them. For me, that's in the same category as acrylics. I will do drawing, watercolors, oils, and digital. I tried acrylics. I very quickly decided they were invented by an angry dude with horns and a pitchfork for the sole purpose of making my life miserable, and never did them again.
I found that when I used the tablet that was down by my wrist, the same with the mouse, I would get some wrist pain. But when I switched to the Cintiq, it stopped. I don't get any wrist pain anymore. After about 14 hours of drawing, I get shoulder pain, but a couple glasses of wine, I'm good. I can go for another couple hours.
But so I did the painting, and I printed it off, and I'm at the tail end of a Sanderson line, so there's like 2.5 million people in front of me. And I'd asked the lady who was volunteering there when I came in, I was like, do you think he'd be okay with signing some fan art? And she looked at me and she goes, well, technically we're above fire code. So we're just trying to move the line quickly. So he's not actually signing anything but the books. We're trying to get people out of here before the fire marshal comes in and catches us.
It was like a Barnes and Noble or something, right?
Yeah, it was at the Barnes and Noble in Anchorage, right? Yeah. So I was like my face must have fallen or something, because she just kind of looked at me and got like this really sympathy, pitiable look on her face. And she's like, well, he's really nice. You can ask, but I can't guarantee, because he said he was just going to do books this time. And I was like, okay. So I'm like standing in line and looking at this. It was a huge print. So I'm looking at it, and like, because I did it in 3 days, you know how you look at a piece that you just finished and you see all the things that you needed to fix about it?
Oh, yeah. It's the only thing I ever see in my pieces is all the stuff I've done wrong. And I'm like, oh, you just focus in on all the things that are glaring at you.
Yeah. And it was my first digital. And so I was looking at it and just going, oh gosh, that's weird. Oh gosh, that's where, oh, please, I hope he doesn't notice that, Yeah. But like some people are coming back through the line, the exit for it was behind where you were standing to get up to the front. And so people were coming back through and they were seeing it, and they were like, oh my gosh, that's so cool. Where did you get that? Do they have any left? Oh, I wish I hadn't bought all my stuff yet. Can I get one of those too? And I was like, oh, I'm sorry. It's just fan art. It's just fan art. It's just fan art. And I'm like tilting it against myself, trying to like make people stop seeing it and stop commenting and just kind of leave me alone, because it's making me nervous. Like I'm nervous.
Oh, you should be handing out business cards.
Yeah, no, I'm the kind of person I have literally thrown up when talking in front of people before.
I want to reach back through time and borrow you.
But, and I was a portrait person, so I hadn't really like done fantasy or fan art or anything. So eventually, I'm getting more and more shaky and more nervous, and just getting like, and finally I look up the line, and there's like this kid, got to be like 9 years old, and he's standing there all hopeful holding this crayon drawing. And finally I'm like, there's a kid with a crayon drawing. I am not alone. I can be here.
He's got a crayon drawing.
I can be a crayon drawing. I've got a messed up drawing. We're good to go. Okay, so I'm using that, the kid is giving me courage, right? But I'm still so nervous. By the time I finally got to like the front of the line, I kind of like just plopped the print down on the table and shoved it in his general direction and like waved the pen towards him.
Okay.
I forgot to ask him to sign the stupid thing. And he just kind of like dodged the pen. By the way, I apologize. I swear I did not almost poke his eye out. But he kind of like leaned away from the pen, continued signing books, handed them off, and, pulled the print over, looks down at it for a second, and he goes, you have a portfolio? And my brain just went, and I'm like,
no.
Goes, oh, well, what about DeviantArt? And my brain flashes back to the portraits that I had up there that I did when I was 13, when I was first starting like anything. And I went, no. Don't look at that.
Whatever you do, don't look
He
at
was
DeviantArt.
like, oh, well, maybe you ought to make one. And he signs it and he says, well, hate to ask though, but did you bring one for me? And my heart just kind of fell and I was like, no. And he's like, oh, okay. As good work though, I'm sorry. He strikes me as the kind of person that if you brought him something that looked like Picasso got drunk, he would just look at it and be like, oh, that's so creative, and sign it for you and hand it to you with a smile. But I took the print and I ran out of the bookstore fast enough that like the lady that I talked to at first, where she was like, oh, did he sign it for you? Oh, she's gone.
And there she goes. So I imagine a cartoon. There's like just like little clouds back to your feet.
Like the paper's still fluttering on the desk from the breeze of the person running so fast. I was like, I could have beat the Flash right there. It was just like
whoosh.
Took 3 days for my brain to stop going. But when I was in the line there was this lady who had just been talking to me and a couple other people about art and how much we love the books. And, she saw the print and was very kind about it to me as well. But at the end of our conversation, she handed me a business card and she's like, I'm not the person that hires the artists. I'm the editor, or one of the editors. But you should send us your portfolio. Do it by the end of November. And so I had her business card. And so I was like, okay, well, between her and Sanderson, maybe I could make a go of this fantasy art thing. It's more fun to do the fantasy art. So I'll do that. So I spent
need to put a portfolio together, right?
Exactly. So I started to work on this thing, a whole bunch of different pieces. I finished the last piece. I've got like 3 days before the, deadline to send my art to Frog God Games.
Now you did them all digital, right?
Yeah, I did them all digitally because there wasn't enough time to do them with oils. So in all honesty, because it was still my first group of digital paintings, there were some issues with them looking back. But at the time I was like, okay, this is pretty good, as good as I can make them. I think they look good. Finished them, do the last brush stroke on the last painting, went to bed early that morning, wee hours of the morning, and wake up, not quite sure what woke me up. And then I bounce back off of my air mattress. I'm airborne, and I realize that there's an earthquake. And that air mattresses apparently can function like a trampoline in an earthquake. So I'm
God.
Bouncing off of this thing like airborne, and everything just moving. It kicked my bedroom door open. At the same time, it kicked the fridge door open. So it illuminated from the light from the fridge. And I see my Cintiq screen and my computer with my portfolio launching into the air and doing a spiraling arc of death. That because they're falling at the same rate as the ground, it looks like it's slow motion.
How bad was this earthquake?
It was a 7.9.
It should be animated with the fridge door flying open and the light, and you're in the air. And
like if you did an animated cartoon of like an artist's worst nightmare, that was it.
I just see your hand reaching out towards it, backlit with the refrigerator light, falling through your fingers.
Gosh. It was the slow motion thing for me. I mean, that's not something you really see in real life. I mean, movies, animation, sure, where it's like the computer was doing that.
I've had that happen.
And, most people, I'm sure if they're caught in an earthquake, they're like, oh my gosh, am I going to be okay? Or is my family going to be okay? Is my niece all right? Oh my gosh, she's only 3, whatever it is. You're concerned about people. But I was airborne going, not the computer.
No.
No. So yeah, that's the death of my first portfolio. And, right around this time, I had been starting to write an epic fantasy book series, and the magic system wasn't working. It seemed kind of broken. I was trying to do something really complex, but because it was so complex and there were so many aspects to it, it wasn't cohesive enough. So it didn't come across as making sense in the writing.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I need to sit back and like iron out the rules more and make this work. And, at the same time, I was like, well, if I'm going to do the fantasy art thing, I should do a fantasy art portfolio. And just those two ideas kind of percolated a little bit. And I'm like, you know what? Instead of doing a portfolio and hoping that someone else hires me, I'm going to make something for myself. And then use that as my portfolio. And if no one hires me, then I've still made something that I can have a go with it.
You lost that whole other portfolio, right? You never got that back.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Oh. It was mush. It was little bits of pieces of computer going just all over. It was sad.
Okay, so then now you have to start from scratch.
No, I'm starting from scratch.
So yeah, you're like, all right, well, okay. So you're like, I'm just going to make something that I want to do, which is the right way to do it.
So I started making a tabletop RPG, and figured if I'm doing a body of work intending for it to be published for a project, I mean, from what I was hearing from a lot of other artists that were coming in the gallery and other people that I was talking to, most of them were actually getting hired or getting work when they had already done other projects for other people. And so I figured if I'm making my own project, it might have some of that same cohesion as you get when you're working on a project for someone else. So that might make for a better portfolio anyways. So I did that, and I started entering the pieces into L. Ron Hubbard's Illustrators of the Future. I moved down to Utah. I met David Farland before he passed away, one of the most kind people you'll ever meet. And, he was kind enough to give me some pointers on writing. And, I joined the Apex writing group, and they introduced me to LTE, and LTE introduced me to, oh, hey, there's this awesome competition. So I started entering into, Illustrators of the Future, and got an honorable mention and a semifinalist and a finalist, and then first place for the quarterly. So I was like, yes, but it was all artwork that I was actually like making for my tabletop RPG. I was just submitting it for the contest as well, so I think there's something to be said for just, it's almost a fake it till you make it, or like act like you're already professional until people start realizing, oh yeah, this person is a professional, because that's the way that they carry themselves. That's the way that they act. That's the way that they treat all of the art that they're working on. Is I'm going to treat everything like it's a professional piece, and it has to be of that quality, and it has to be done, within the time frame that needs to be done by. And, trying to do that volume of work really helped me pin down like exactly how long it's going to take me to do a different project or a different subject. So being able to sit down and tell someone, yeah, I can have that done in 3 weeks, and know for a fact you're actually going to have it done in 3 weeks.
Yeah, if you don't have an assignment, you just make an assignment, and what's better is it's something you're actually interested in. It's something that you're excited about. So it shows in the work, and then everybody can see that too. Exactly. And then and it's going to be your best work because you're excited by it. And then you're going to get hired for what you want to do because it's automatically going to be something that is going to look amazing.
Exactly. And back when I was looking at it from, okay, well, I just need to make a portfolio, it wasn't focusing on, okay, this is what I'm really passionate about and what I love about doing art. It was more, okay, well, I think this is what people might want to buy. So there is a difference that comes through in the work that you do, depending on how you're approaching the project. Best critique I ever got, though, that was from my niece. She was like, little tyke, still learning how to talk, coloring with crayons, the whole 9 yards. And I had just got the replacement Cintiq screen for the one that was destroyed in the earthquake. And, I'm sitting down and I'm starting to do, a piece on it. And she had this thing where anytime she saw me drawing or painting anything, she'd be like, Auntie Tenany, I color too. And I'd be like, you can't say no to that. It's so cute. So I'd be like, okay. And so she'd get all excited and bouncy and run around and go find her crayons and hop up on the couch beside me, like on my right hand side, so I couldn't actually use my arm to do anything. But she'd hop up beside me and happily color away along with her auntie. So she did that to me, and she's cuddled next to me, and she's like, Tremani, is you coloring on computer? I'm like, yeah, I'm coloring on the computer. And she's like, and I see. So I tilt it so she can see what I'm working on. And she goes, oh. She looks at me, and then she looks at the screen, and she reaches over and she starts patting my leg. Like when you're patting a kid, if they've got like an owie or something and you're patting their back or whatever, she starts patting my leg, and she's like, no, it's okay, Tremani. It's all right. It's okay. I'm like, what is it, Mindy? And she's like, no, it's okay. I'm like, Mindy, you can tell me, what is it? And she's like, well, she looks at me and she looks at the drawing and she looks back up at me and she goes, it's a little bit cute and a little bit creepy and I'm not sure how that works. And I'm like, well, it does work though, right? And she goes, yeah, I guess, but don't do it again. And then she got up and ran away.
But don't do it again.
Don't do it again.
Don't do it again.
And on, like, whenever I was going to go color something, she'd be like, oh, can I color too? And I'd say yes. And then she'd like stop herself. And then she'd almost glare at me and she'd go, are you coloring good today, Tremani? I'm like, yes. And she's like, okay then. But looking at it, I was like, okay, I was doing a piece that was, you know, a kind of combination between cute and scary. And it actually was not really hitting the mark quite right. So, you know, out of the mouths of babes, some of the best critiques that you get are the ones where someone just looks at you and says, that's not working.
It's not,
you know. And the thing with that is like being able to look at what you're doing and assess whether or not some things are working or other things aren't. That's what lets you see what needs to be improved on or adjusted and tweaked in the art that you're doing. Yeah. So when I went from my art is really not something that should be shown to anyone to this is really flipping good. And I, not to brag, but I did it in about 3 years. And it was because I sat down and I started comparing my work. I would choose 2 or 3 different artists who were doing artwork that was phenomenal, that made my jaw drop, that I looked at it and like, oh my God, that is amazing. How on earth do they do that? It's so much better than mine. Great. Take that artwork, pin it up in front of you and work on your piece. And as you're working on your piece, look at it and go, what are they doing that I'm not? How is it different? What can I change? Really look at your work and critique it, self-critique it. And then that's the ability to look at it and be honest about what isn't working. And that's what lets you see what you can improve on. And I went from, you know, someone that kind of does okay work to my work is a lot better than it was and in a much shorter time span than when I was being kinder to myself and my self-critiques, if that makes sense.
And what does your niece have to say now?
Well, she doesn't ever run away from my paintings anymore, if that clarifies it.
That's a step up.
For me, it was the fact that she was like patting my knee to be like, oh no, it's okay, it's all right.
It's okay, don't cry.
Don't cry. I'm like, oh my gosh. But you know, you really, she gave me the best critique ever. And you really have to be able to do that for yourself.
To be honest, I guess, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, it's okay, don't cry. Could be better.
And not be discouraged about it. Because, like, it's the thing with going back to starting off with portraits. If you start off with the hardest thing and just accept, okay, it's the hardest thing out there. It's not going to be perfect. And that's okay. That removes, you know, the oh, gosh, I'm not doing it the way as good as someone else, so therefore I'm discouraged. It removes that, and it just lets you practice. Yeah, and lets you really assess, and you learn faster that way.
Yeah, no, yeah, and I mean, it's not going to be perfect. You're going to get better the more you work at it, you know. And just got to give yourself a little bit of leeway. So, wow. So, but so how many pieces do you have in your portfolio now? You said you had quite a few of them.
Well, not all of them that I've shown to people yet, because a lot of them, I mean, I started working on my next portfolio right as soon after the earthquake, as soon as I could afford the next Cintiq screen. But right now what I do is I basically do a drawing on pencil drawing, concept design the creature character, get it to where I like it, take that, bring it digital, paint it black and white digitally, and then I print it off and do all the color work in oil.
Mm-hmm.
So, it lets me do kind of like the grisaille, black and white underpainting without having to use like the turpentine and mineral spirits for the solvents.
Yeah.
Because I get migraines from those like nothing else. So,
oh, really?
Yeah, just use modern media to kind of still do a traditional painting style,
yeah.
But work around it. So, I mean, I've got 136 paintings done right now.
Wow.
But a lot of them, because I started back when I was, still learning throughout doing a lot of them, I'm going to go back and tweak and improve some things that legitimately need to be tweaked before anyone sees them. So I'm just going to do like a big launch of like, here's all of the work, boom.
Wow.
Once I get those kind of reworked a little bit.
Yeah, I'm always tempted to go back and like rework stuff. It's never good enough, So.
But there is a difference though. Like even this one behind me right here, I'll look at it and I'll be like, yeah, I need to fix her skirt, or I need to tweak this or tweak that. It's fine, right?
Yeah.
There are pieces where you need to just let go of that impulse and it's fine. But there are some pieces where it's like, if it's going to be published in a game, if I'm going to kickstart and actually like make a go of this tabletop RPG, I need to push that art a bit further.
Yeah. So as long as your niece doesn't run away from it, we're good.
Yes, exactly.
That's a test.
I'll fly them to Alaska and do the kid test.
Do the kid test.
Is this the right kind of cute and creepy?
So you're going to do a Kickstarter for it?
That's the plan. I've actually got to the point where I'm hiring some other artists to do some of the artwork for the gaming system, because for what I want to do for the launch, there's just a lot more art that I need to have done for it than I can do in the time frame.
Oh, that's exciting.
Say that I want to do in the time frame.
Yeah. So when are you going to do you know when you're going to do the Kickstarter? Or?
Tentatively, I'm planning for 2025. I want to do another round of playtesting, and then, I want to there's a really wonderful editor that I got introduced to a while back, and I want to run it by her and have her go through the text and, do some editing work for the book. And I want to do, again, a bit more artwork for it, but it should be ready by 2025. I just don't want to put out a specific date, because I would rather put more time into making sure it's as perfect or as close to perfect as I can get it.
Yeah.
Before we launch, and not have like that time pressure on it quite yet.
Are you going to go to Gen Con next year?
I don't think I have a booth at that one. I think it would be fun to be on some panels, but
I mean, that's the big gaming convention, so you probably, should look into it.
Mostly what I do so far is, any convention that I can drive to. I'll go ahead and apply and do a booth at. But anything that I would need to fly to, I just go to those ones for fun.
Yeah. No, you should probably go to Gen Con, maybe just to, promote it especially if you're going to do a Kickstarter, because you got to start getting a really big mailing list for that, because that's really the best way to succeed with the Kickstarter is to get a good mailing list.
Yeah.
So I don't know what your mailing list looks like.
I do have a mailing list. I've got a couple hundred people on it. I've actually been I have one of them here. It's not coded yet. But so I figure if you're gonna make something as an artist, like try and fill a niche that it doesn't exist yet.
Yeah.
In some way, as far as what you're making. So like I can give you a sneak peek, because no one's seen these yet. Okay. But these are fully illustrated. I'll get it in the camera view here.
Yay!
They're fully illustrated, dry erasable character gaming sheets.
Oh, those are cool.
So that's one of the monsters that's in the gaming system. And, there's the different areas where you can fill out information for your character and, make it work. And, the kind of outlines where you can put the card slots and everything. Because my niece was really into playing D&D, right?
Yep.
And she kept losing her character sheet. So there was this one, they couldn't do the next session for 3 weeks because she'd actually accidentally mixed it in with her homework.
Oh, gosh.
And, on the one hand, I was like, okay, I get it. The DM being a bit frustrated with that. I totally get that. On the other hand, why does the gaming sheet for tabletop RPG, which is fun and awesome, why does it look like something that a kid can mix in with their homework?
Yeah.
This doesn't quite make sense. So I started looking for something to maybe give to her for Christmas or whatever that would, kind of solve that problem. And I couldn't find anything. So when I started making my system, I was like, I'm going to fix that problem for my game.
This is not getting mixed up with the homework.
Yes, exactly. So something that looks cool, doesn't look like your homework, has the art on it. And I make them by hand out of canvas. It's all my art. They're completely handmade, but I've done some play testing on them.
Uh-huh.
They're working pretty nice.
So, it looks really good. It's very, very awesome looking.
Sneak peek. No one's seen that yet.
I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it.
You got the exclusive.
Sean Nathan Rick says he wants to be on your mailing list. So where can people find your website or your mailing list?
I think I have a link for my mailing list on my portfolio website. But if not, then I will upload it right after the podcast. I'll put it up.
And what's your website?
DecisiveArt.myportfolio.com.
DecisiveArt.myportfolio.com. Awesome. So, what shows are within driving distance of you? So, what shows do you usually go to?
Well, I'm trying to renew for FanX this next year. I did drive all the way down to Dallas-Fort Worth for Dallas Comic-Con. That was quite the drive, but I did it, and I'll be back next year. So it's usually Salt Lake and Dallas, and then I'm applying to a couple others, so we'll see how those go.
Cool. Yeah, I did Salt Lake last year. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So I like Salt Lake. So
it's one of the ones where a lot of the volunteers are. I mean, volunteers at all the conventions are great, but they really just do things for you that they don't have to, but they're very kind and they do it anyways. So when I was doing the load-in, just for example, I have issues with my lower back and my knee. And so I was trying to lug all of my stuff.
Oh.
And one of them kind of saw me. I must have been gimping a little bit because she saw me and she's like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm so sorry. Can I go up and, up the stairs in this area? Because, otherwise I'm bringing my stuff around the building in the heat and I kind of have these, back problems." And she just looked at me and went, "Oh my gosh." And within 2 minutes, she had 3 guys, and her all come over and converge and pick up all my stuff and be like, "What booth are you needing to go to?" They carried everything to my booth for me. And I was like, "Thank you. Here's art as a thank you." And they're like, "Oh my gosh, it's actually good art. Thank you." And I was like, "Okay, well, thank you for that." But
it's always nice. It's always nice when they have good volunteers
to do that. But the volunteers, they try to go the extra mile, and it really did make all the difference for me because my back was bugging me, and they were very kind in doing that.
Yeah. It's hard to move all the stuff by yourself. It really is. So it's nice when there's volunteers that help. Yeah, but I love the volunteers at the shows. So, but do you do a lot of shows?
Try to, but it just depends, scheduling and everything. But yeah, the ones that I can drive to are definitely on my favorites, but anything I can fly to, those are the ones that I go and listen to the panels and everything. And then, hopefully they're in cities that have art museums, so I can go to the art museum after or before and like geek out and like sketch what's on the walls. Like I went to New York for the comic convention in New York, and then I stopped by the art gallery. Oh gosh. So I only saw one room. I went to the Met and I only saw one room. I spent all day there.
The Met is huge. I used to go to the Met all the time.
Well, I went in and I brought my sketchbook and I went in and I went into the first room and I just went, oh!
Where'd you end up going? Did you go left?
I went around in the left and then continued. Honestly, I couldn't even tell you how I got.
If you went left, you would have ended up in like the Hellenistic sculpture room, I think.
It was with the Greek things. It was a room with paintings on the wall. But I got to that first room that I went to that had paintings in it. And I sat down and I started sketching one of the paintings. Mm-hmm. And next thing I know, like someone is tapping me on my shoulder, and I was still just like vaguely aware of it because I'm still sitting there sketching. And then someone taps me again and they said, "Ma'am, we're closed." And I just kind of like startled and looked up at him, and I look around and then I look back at him. It's one of the museum people. And I'm like, "Oh, I'm so sorry." I didn't realize. I spent the entire day just sitting there being like, "Oh my gosh, this painting."
Wow.
So I need to go back to that one so I can, spend another day staring at one other painting.
You didn't even get to the rest of the Met. You didn't get to the Egyptian area with all the Egyptian stuff or anything else.
First painting I saw, my brain just went,
I used to go to the Met like all the time when I was a student there, and I used to have this like little secrets box because when you went there, they had these little tabs that you would there were like these little aluminum tabs, and they were different colors, and they had the little M for the Met, and you would clip them on to show that you paid. And this was like back in the 90s, and I found after a while, because when you were a student, they told you would make a suggested donation. And so I learned really fast that you didn't have to pay the full whatever they were asking you to pay. You would just pay like, a couple dollars or whatever, and they'd kind of scowl at you. But I was a student, so I didn't have a ton of money. So I'd make a couple dollars. And then I learned after a while that they started to recycle their little buttons every couple of days. And so they had the same different buttons. So I started collecting the buttons in this little secrets container. And so I'd go up, because I went so often, I'd go up and I'd look and I'd see what color button everyone was wearing. And I'd open up my little container and I would just put on that color button and it would just go in. So I had like all the different color Met buttons. And I'd be like, oh, well, today it's teal. And I just put on my button and go in. And because I didn't have any money, half the time I had to walk home because I didn't have the $1.25 for the subway, and it was like an hour and a half to walk back to Brooklyn, and so I'm from from way up there, and but it was just awesome. You spent so much time walking, going to the Met, and then go out to Central Park behind there and draw there, and then go down to the zoo and draw there, and but the Met was my favorite museum of all time.
You just made me like insanely jealous about how many times you got to go to the Met.
Oh, I should have kept that little secrets box. I don't know what happened to it, but I so wish I had it. I had all these little rusty buttons with the little colors on them. I wish I had it. I hope one day I just open a box and there it is with all its little stupid little buttons with all the colors on it. But
put them up on a pin board as like a antique collection of
I wish I had it. And there was in the front steps there's always people sitting there, and they had the pretzels and the seagulls, and and you just go in and just draw. I love to go into the Hellenistic sculpture room and up into the Egypt room and all the big paintings and everything. I used to spend just whole days just going there. And then I would walk all the way back to Brooklyn. It would take me an hour and a half, 2 hours to walk back to Brooklyn. I mean, it's probably, I don't even know how far it was. I mean, this is the Met's like 82nd Street, I think. And Brooklyn's, all the way down and across the Brooklyn Bridge. So it was like a big event. I used to walk so much when I lived in New York City. I just walked everywhere.
Well, with the price of cabs, I would be walking too.
Oh God, I never took a cab anywhere. We took the subway everywhere. So, we didn't need to take a cab anywhere in New York. I could never afford a cab when I went to school. So you took the subway at all times. Yeah. So,
Well, so far I've been to, the Getty in Los Angeles, uh,
mhm.
and they've got probably the most interesting piece that I found there. Like they have the Rembrandt and the Rembrandt's students all, their pieces all in the same area. And so
Oh,
I went
cool.
in and like there's, the Rembrandt painting that you recognize and you go up to it and you're like, oh, that is so awesome. And you're continuing on and just looking at everything else that's in the room. The most amazing painting in that whole art gallery. It was just this little 4x6 painting. And it was really hard to spot because it was so small. But if you go up to it and you go right up to it and you look at it, it looked like it was photorealistic detail. And it's just this little tiny, tiny thing. But there was so much detail in that. I swear that, and it was one of Rembrandt's students, but I swear that whoever painted that had to have been using like a magnifying glass and a brush with a single hair on it. And I still don't know how he painted something that small with that much detail.
What was it a painting of?
It was just a portrait, guy sitting in a room, the whole traditional oil portrait painting thing with a little bit of still life kind of, environment background and the portrait of the person. But it was, oh my gosh, so detailed. Normally, you'll if you see something that's that detailed, it's because it was painted really big and then someone photographed it and then shrunk it down and you're looking at a small picture of this thing that was painted big so they had the room to do the detail.
Yeah.
Just this tiny, tiny little painting. And if you were walking through the room, unless you were determined to look at every single painting, which I was, you probably would have missed it.
Wow, that's
It was just
crazy.
this small, small little thing. And I mean, I talked earlier about, finding people who did work that you're like, oh my gosh, how did they do that? I have no idea how he did that. That was amazing. I mean, like I stood there and just ogled it for I don't even know how long, but that was one of the funnest pieces at the Getty. And then, the National Gallery, the art in there is phenomenal. But a lot of the museums you go to, the people will say, okay, please don't photograph, yada 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 yada. But you go in there and they're like, oh yeah, by the way, if you want to take photographs of anything, feel free. If you want to sketch it, if you want to film, go for it. Just don't distribute it or make money. Just it's here for your learning purposes. And you're like, oh, okay. Because I guess the building and the start of the collection and the library that's attached to it was actually like donated to the public by, I think it was one of the friends of the founding fathers. But basically his perspective was that, he said education should be available for people no matter what their income is, like no matter whether or not they're wealthy. So it's open to the public.
Cool.
So it's that's why even nowadays when you go into it, a lot of the museums you go into, it's like, okay, here's your entrance fee. You go there, it's free to go in. So there was just a lot of things to learn from at that one. But as far as the art that just made your jaw drop and made your mind go blank because it was so amazing, that was the Met.
Wow. So that's what you mean. Is that in Washington? This like the Smithsonian and stuff. They're all free.
It was I think within a couple blocks of the Smithsonian.
Yeah. That was pretty cool because because it's just open to the public, which is great. That's just the way it should be. The rules for students are different now at the Met in New York. Though it used to be that students were suggested donation, but now it's not the same as it used to be. So you have to
probably realized what you were doing with your pins.
I know. Like, no. And I'm like, students should get a little bit of pass on that because you're a student. You don't have any money. I mean, now when when you're a little bit older,
when you're a student, you're broke enough that you're like, oh darn it, I dropped dinner on the floor. Well, we can pick the stuff off of it. Like, just
I know. students get a pass. They should be able to go look at the art for the $3 and have to skip dinner. But when you're older, you should have to pay the full price. Because you're expected to have your stuff together a little bit by then.
What was your favorite art of everything in the Met?
Oh gosh. I like the Greek sculptures. I don't know. I just like the Hellenistic Greek sculpture. The way they do the wet drapery, and it's just the way that the stone clings to things. I've always amazed by that. Uh, I love the way I always want to touch the sculptures. I mean, sculptures are meant to be touched to be appreciated. I remember reading that. Of course, now that's not really feasible because if you had hundreds of thousands of people touching the marble sculptures at the Met, there wouldn't be anything left of them.
You've been wear away if you have enough.
Yeah. But I mean, you're supposed to appreciate a marble sculpture with your hands, by touching it. That's the way to appreciate it properly. But obviously that's not really a feasible way to do it with so many people nowadays. But I always wanted to just run my hands over them. But I love to draw them. That's one of my favorite things to see and to look at. I spend a lot of time enjoying those. I like the Baroque and the Rococo periods a lot. The paintings, the Rembrandts, of course. I never liked the MoMA and the more the modern art. I'm not a really big modern art fan.
Yeah,
I'm much more a classical art person.
I was taking classes, and I don't want to. I won't say names. But I was taking classes at a college, and the instructor was a very big fan of, modern art and, Impressionism, which early Impressionism I really like, because there are some things that I could go into detail about it that are really impressive. But, he liked modern Impressionism and modern art, and, started off the class with the lecture about how all forms of art are valid because it's just about expressionism and, what individuals like. So we're just here to push what we like further, which I'm like, okay, good. I can get behind that. To each their own, and we'll do our own thing and we'll learn. It'll be great. But then, it was a life drawing and composition. So we were there to try and get a good likeness and do some composition and everything. And throughout the class, though, every time we were all seated around the subject, and every time he'd walk behind someone who was doing anything even remotely realistic, he'd be like, merely representative, or you really just need to learn how to be creative with your work, or you're merely copying what you're seeing, and all this kind of stuff. And I was there to, I'm here to learn how to draw someone accurately from life.
Yeah. You have to start with drawing accurately before you can deviate off of that.
Exactly. So, that was what I was taking the class for. And, a lot of the other students started, just trying to do stuff that he would like. So he'd stop saying stuff like that. And not me. I was just like, nope, I'm doing my thing.
Yeah. I mean,
so, he walked behind my easel one day and he was like, merely representative. And then he walked behind the easel for the person right next to me. Now, at the start of this 45-minute drawing session, that student had taken the pencil and drawn a single line and a smudge across his drawing, set down the pencil, and played on his phone on a video game for the rest of the class. Right? So he saw my work it actually looked so like the model. The model actually asked me if she could purchase it from me after we were done, because it looked, oh my gosh, it looks just like me. Right? So he puts down my work and then stands behind the smudge across the paper, and he goes, oh, the expressionism and the emotion and the simplicity of the human form is just brilliant. And he continues walking around and critiquing. So it was that kind of thing for the whole class. And so for our final, he got very pointed with me, because he's like, okay, you have to, for your final piece, you have to do a modern impressionism or abstract piece. And he looked directly at me and he says, or you're going to fail your final. And I'm like,
oh my goodness.
Okay. So okay, what parameters can I give myself to, because that's just not my thing. What parameters can I give myself to kind of make myself do something he might be happy with? So I'm like, okay, I'm going to do a portrait. I'm going to do a portrait in 5 minutes with pen on really rough paper. Okay. set the
Okay.
timer, sat down. I'm like, okay, there's probably going to be enough wrong with it that he might be okay with it. I don't know. That was my take
crappy
on it.
enough, you might like it.
Yeah. I was like, okay, let's do some things that'll make it so I can't like make the corrections that I
And then if it looks realistic enough, I'll rub it with my butt cheek.
Exactly.
You know?
Yes. So I did that. I set the timer. I sketched it out with pen, and I looked at it, and from drawing for 3 hours a day, twice a week for 3 months, trying to get a likeness, I got a likeness in pen in 5 minutes on a portrait.
Oh.
And I looked at it and I was like, yes, that's exactly what I wanted from this class. And then I was like, oh crap, what am I doing for my final?
God damn it.
Yeah, I'm like, yes, damn it. So I ended up doing something, and I don't know, I guess subconsciously I hated it enough that by the time it came time to like drive the hour and a half into Anchorage or into the college area to go to class, I forgot that piece at home. So I realized that 5 minutes until going into the class to go submit my finals project, and I open up my case, and like all I have is a little vial of India ink and printer paper. No brushes, no pencil, like nothing. I didn't bring anything because it was just like turn in your artwork and you're done for the day, right? So I grabbed the inkwell and I dipped my thumb in it and I smudged some stuff on there that kind of looked like a general shape for a portrait. It didn't work, but it was the only piece of printer paper that I had. So I went over to the fountain to try and like rinse off some of the ink, and like it's still dripping, and that didn't work. And I'm trying to get it dried off, and then I'm trying to do like some other thing to kind of fix something on it. It just looked horrible. It looked like a kid had finger painted on this thing. And I was like, but the class was starting. I'm like, he said if we bring in a piece, we're not going to fail. And I don't know. I got good enough grades for everything else. So I went in there and I set it down, and it's like slopped when I set it down. It was still oozing ink and water. And I was just like, oh my God. And it just, and I'm like, and I'm just,
and I leave that
mentally just on the cringing. And he's critiquing everyone else. And then he comes up to my piece and he goes, oh, I finally got through to you. You're getting an A. And I was like, ew.
No. Let me squeegee my piece off the table now. I'm going to squeegee my A off the table.
I've never been so very dreadfully unhappy about someone being happy with my work before. It was horrendous. So, but that's what made me realize, like, that probably wasn't the right college to learn how to do what I wanted to do.
Well, you did learn to do a fantastic portrait in 5 minutes, which is the goal. You got what you wanted out of it. So good for you.
That was me doing my own thing, though. So I was like, yeah, I'll just keep doing my own thing.
You got what you wanted out of the class, and you squeegeed your A. So,
I got an A, and, the person that assigned the artwork to me was extraordinarily happy with it. I was not.
Okay. That's a horrible story. I feel like I need a shower.
Yeah, so talk about artistic journeys. Don't let anyone else force you into doing something that you're not happy with. It will not be good.
But you got what you wanted out of the class, so you stuck with it. And then
on a level, my clients have always been happy with my work.
Good job. All right. Well, we're pretty much out of time. So, where can people find your work, your excellent work that you're happy with?
Well, just the website for now, decisiveart.myportfolio.com. And I will make sure that there's a QR code for the mailing list up there.
All right. Well, it was awesome talking with you. So thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
And you have been listening to The Professional Artist on 107.7. And I look forward to talking with all of you next week. So thank you. Take care.